Remember that old thing, democracy, and the people deciding what happens? Those were the days when the government served the will of the people and lived in fear of our judgment every 5 years as we went to the polls. But the will of the people is now nothing more than a minor inconvenience to those who govern us. Take the rollout of the clean air scheme ULEZ at the hands of London's despotic Mayor Sadiq Khan. A policy, the evidence for which is thinner than posh spice on the keto diet. This hasn't stopped the leadership at City Hall inflicting a wildly unpopular policy based upon the fantasy that somehow thousands of lives will be saved, and a policy, of course, which will impact those on the lowest incomes. Apparently, this is all about the environment. People have got to get rid of their perfectly functional cars and upgrade them to new eco-friendly cars, which involve vast amounts of energy and resource to produce. So a workhorse 10-year-old Volkswagen Passat that exists must make way for a Tesla or Nissan Leaf that in some cases hasn't even been built yet. All of this to save the planet. How is throwing away old cars that work good for the environment? Make it make sense. Now, this clean air scheme has come to national attention, partly because Labour's very own ginger growler, Angela Rayner, has admitted this policy will be rolled out across all our major cities, and because it's another example of the war on people power, which reached its nadir during the pandemic, when the public were told who to see, who not to see, when to go shopping and where, when to work, when not to work, and so on. We should have been allowed to make a judgment about the risks of the virus for ourselves and our families and act accordingly, as was the case in Sweden and the US states of Florida and Texas, where, surprise, surprise, they had excellent COVID outcomes. No lockdown, no mask mandate Sweden boasts the lowest excess pandemic deaths in Europe. People power in action. The authoritarianism we saw in the UK during the pandemic, for our own good apparently, was a test case for the future, the shape of things to come, with the state telling you what's best for you and how to live and behave. And the woke takeover of our public institutions is starting to tell you what to think and say as well. And COVID tyranny, in which people were masked, locked down, and in many cases jabbed against their will, has been replaced by a brand new political variant: climate change. Now, I'm all for getting emissions down and cleaning up the planet, and I'm worried about rising temperatures and freak weather incidents. A climate change denier I am not. We must act. But the arbitrary push for net zero, which looks to be making all the same mistakes as COVID, by ignoring the economy, open debate and evidence-based science, is another example of the war on people power, with the state and corporations via a compliant media telling you how and when to heat your home, which car to drive, and perhaps in time, how many flights you can take, how many cups of tea you can have in a day, and how much meat you can have on your dinner plate. We now have a political and media class detached from the concerns of millions of Brits, which ultimately poses a threat to our democracy and plays into the hands of bonkers extremists who will happily seek to fill the void. It's time for politicians to understand that they work for us, not the other way round, and we pay their wages. Since the pandemic, it feels like the roles have reversed, with us serving them and obeying their will. And it seems to me that Labour and the Conservatives are two cheeks of the same arse. Whether it's concerns about the cost of net zero, the real-world impact of policies like ULEZ, or worries about illegal immigration into the country, if people don't feel listened to and heard, and if policies are not rolled out with the public's support, engagement and consent, it doesn't end well. Disaffected voices grow louder, public anger rises, and bad actors take advantage. If they're not careful, the peasants will revolt. A revolting outcome for all concerned.